When we talk about financial betrayal, most people immediately think, oh, it's just about money. And that assumption alone is part of why this kind of betrayal cuts so deeply and why it's so often minimized. Because what's really being violated here isn't your bank account. It's your sense of safety. It's trust. It's the unspoken agreement that the person closest to you would not put you in harm's way. Money represents stability. It represents choice. It represents freedom. So when someone lies about it, hides it, manipulates it, or weaponizes it, your nervous system doesn't register that as a spreadsheet problem. It registers it as danger. Suddenly, the ground under you feels unstable. You start asking questions like, what else don't I know? Or if I can't trust this, what can I trust? That's why financial betrayal can feel as destabilizing, sometimes more so than emotional or even physical betrayal. And here's the part people struggle to name. Financial betrayal often happens quietly. There's no dramatic confrontation at first. There's just a sense that something feels off. Bills you didn't know about, accounts you don't have access to, decisions being made without you, about your future, your security, your survival. Over time, that quiet erosion of transparency eats away at your sense of agency. You stop feeling like a partner and start feeling like a liability. Many people blame themselves. They think, I should have paid more attention, or I should have been smarter, or I should have asked more questions. But that self-blame ignores a critical reality. Trust is not foolish. Trust is a requirement for intimacy. You didn't fail because you trusted. You were harmed because someone violated that trust. And there's another layer here that doesn't get enough attention. Financial betrayal often comes bundled with shame. People don't talk about it because money is already such a loaded topic. There's embarrassment. There's fear of judgment. There's the worry that others will say, why didn't you leave? Or how did you let this happen? That silence isolates you further, and isolation is exactly what keeps the betrayal powerful. The emotional fallout can be profound. Anxiety spikes. Sleep gets disrupted. Your sense of competence takes a hit. You may feel smaller, dependent, or trapped, not because you are those things, but because betrayal rewires how safe the world feels. And when the betrayal involves finances, it threatens the very mechanisms you rely on to escape, rebuild, or protect yourself. So if you're sitting here thinking, why does this hurt so much? The answer is simple, because it wasn't just about money. It was about trust, autonomy, and the promise of safety. And when those are broken, the impact is real, valid, and deeply human. And the moment you name it for what it truly is, you take the first step toward taking your power back. Once you understand that financial betrayal is about power and safety, the next piece becomes painfully clear. For certain toxic and narcissistic personalities, money is never just money. It's leverage. It's control. It's a way to shape the reality of the relationship without ever having to raise their voice. And that's what makes it so dangerous. It can look responsible, practical, even generous on the surface, while quietly stripping you of autonomy underneath. These individuals often position themselves as the financially competent one. They may insist on handling the accounts, managing the bills, making the investments, not because it's efficient, but because it places them in the role of authority. You're told, don't worry about it, I've got this, and at first that can feel like relief. But over time, information becomes restricted. Questions are met with irritation. Transparency disappears. And before you realize it, access to money and therefore choice is no longer equal. In many cases, the pattern begins with excess. There's spending, gifts, trips, or promises that feel expansive and exciting. This isn't generosity, it's conditioning. It creates dependency and emotional debt. Later, when the money tightens or disappears, the message becomes, look at everything I've done for you, or you should be grateful. What once felt like care becomes a ledger used against you. Another common tactic is financial chaos. Sudden debts, impulsive decisions, risky investments, or unpaid taxes that you knew nothing about, all landing in your lap. When you react, you're told you're overreacting, ungrateful, or bad with money. This is financial gaslighting. It keeps you off balance, doubting your instincts, and too busy putting out fires to question why the fires keep starting. Money is also used as punishment. Funds are withheld, support is delayed. You're made to beg, justify, or explain basic needs. This creates a parent-child dynamic rather than a partnership, and that imbalance isn't accidental. Dependence makes it harder to leave, harder to set boundaries, harder to say no. Control thrives where fear lives. What's important to understand is that this isn't about budgeting styles or financial disagreements. Healthy relationships can disagree about money and still operate with mutual respect and transparency. What you're dealing with here is a pattern where money becomes a tool to dominate, silence, or destabilize. And once you see that pattern, it's hard to unsee. If you've ever felt anxious asking about finances, ashamed for needing money, or afraid to make independent decisions, that wasn't coincidence. That was conditioning. And recognizing that doesn't make you cynical. It makes you clear. Because when money is used as a weapon, naming it is the first act of resistance. Once you recognize how money can be used as control, the next question becomes unavoidable. How do I know if this is actually happening to me? Because financial betrayal rarely announces itself clearly. It doesn't show up with a warning label. It shows up as confusion, as discomfort, as a vague sense that something isn't adding up, and that feeling matters more than you've been taught to believe. One of the most common signs is being kept out of the financial loop. You don't have access to accounts. You don't know passwords. You're unclear about income, debts, or long-term plans. When you ask, you're brushed off, minimized, or told you wouldn't understand. That isn't protection, that's exclusion. In healthy relationships, transparency is normal. Secrecy is not. Another red flag is sudden financial instability that you didn't create. Bills appear out of nowhere. Credit issues surface unexpectedly. Money that was handled somehow vanished. And instead of accountability, you're met with blame. You're told you're bad with money, irresponsible, or too emotional about finances. Over time, you may stop asking questions just to avoid the stress. And that silence benefits only one person. Pay attention to how you feel around money conversations. Do you feel anxious before bringing something up? Do you rehearse what you're going to say, worried it'll turn into an argument? Do you feel guilty for needing money or ashamed for wanting financial clarity? Those emotional responses are data. They're signals that something isn't safe in the dynamic. Another sign is financial inconsistency. Promises are made and broken. Support appears and disappears. One moment there's generosity, the next there's scarcity, with no clear explanation. This unpredictability keeps you off balance. When stability depends on someone else's mood, you're not in a partnership, you're in a power structure. You may also notice that financial decisions are framed as for your own good, even when they cost you independence. You're discouraged from working, studying, saving, or having your own account. It's presented as love, efficiency, or tradition. But if the outcome leaves you more dependent and less informed, that's not care, that's control. And perhaps the most painful sign is the internal one. You start doubting yourself. You question your judgment. You wonder if you're being dramatic. You compare your situation to others and tell yourself it's not that bad. That self-doubt doesn't come from nowhere. It's the result of repeated invalidation layered on top of real harm. If any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, let me be clear about one thing. Recognizing these signs is not betrayal. It's awareness. And awareness is what begins to loosen the grip of control. Because the moment you trust what you're seeing, you stop being lost in the dark. Once you begin to see the signs, what often hits next isn't relief, it's grief. And that's the part people don't warn you about. The emotional aftermath of financial betrayal can be just as heavy, if not heavier, than the practical consequences. Because now you're not only dealing with money problems, you're dealing with what this experience has done to how you see yourself. Shame shows up quickly, a deep, quiet shame that whispers, "I should have known," or "How did I let this happen?" And that shame can be paralyzing. It keeps people silent. It keeps them isolated. It convinces them that their story is somehow worse or more embarrassing than everyone else's. But shame thrives in secrecy, and financial betrayal is one of the most isolating experiences precisely because it's so hard to talk about. Fear is right there too. Not just fear of instability, but fear of the future. fear of making the wrong decision again, fear of independence. You may find yourself hesitating over basic choices, second-guessing purchases, or feeling panicked about money even when you technically have enough. That's not irrational. That's a nervous system that has learned the world is unpredictable. And then there's the loss of identity. Many people come out of financial betrayal feeling smaller, less capable, less confident than they were before. You might start to believe you're bad with money, too trusting, or not cut out for independence. That belief can be devastating because it replaces your true identity with a story that was shaped by manipulation, not reality. What's especially painful is how invisible this grief can be. There's no clear ritual for mourning lost security or broken trust. People may tell you to just move on or be grateful it wasn't worse, but those comments dismiss the real trauma of having your stability undermined by someone you trusted. Financial betrayal doesn't just drain resources, it drains dignity. This is also where trauma responses show up. Hypervigilance around spending, avoidance of bank statements, emotional numbness, or intense anxiety tied to financial discussions. These are not character flaws, they are adaptations. Your mind and body are trying to protect you after learning that something fundamental was unsafe. And here's the part that matters most. None of this means you're weak. It means you were in a situation that required trust, and that trust was violated. Healthy people don't expect betrayal. They don't live in constant suspicion. They connect, and connection always carries risk. So if you feel shaken, embarrassed, fearful, or disconnected from who you used to be, understand this. Those feelings are evidence of harm, not failure. And healing begins the moment you stop judging your pain and start honoring what it's trying to tell you. After shame and fear settle in, there's often another layer that keeps people stuck longer than the betrayal itself: confusion. You know something was wrong, but you're still questioning it. You replay conversations. You remember the explanations, the justifications, the promises. And part of you wonders if maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you were too sensitive. Maybe it really is your fault. This is where financial gaslighting does its most lasting damage. Gaslighting around money doesn't always sound dramatic. It sounds reasonable. You're overthinking it. I already explained this. You're terrible with numbers. If you trusted me, you wouldn't keep asking. Over time, those messages erode your confidence in your own perception. You stop relying on what you see and start relying on what you're told, even when it doesn't make sense. Breaking free from that requires something that feels uncomfortable at first: clarity. Clarity means facts, documents, numbers, paper trails. It means grounding yourself in reality instead of emotional explanations. This isn't about becoming cold or transactional. It's about stabilizing yourself in truth after living in confusion. Reality is an anchor when manipulation thrives on fog. Another crucial step is emotional detachment. And from the explanations. You may never get a clean confession or a moment of accountability. Waiting for that keeps you tethered to someone who benefits from your doubt. Closure doesn't come from their honesty. It comes from your decision to stop negotiating with distortion. Boundaries also become essential here, not emotional appeals, not threats. Boundaries rooted in action, separate accounts, independent access to information, clear limits around what you will and won't accept. These steps can feel drastic, but they are not punitive. They are protective, and protection is what you're reclaiming. There's often grief in this stage, too. Letting go of the fantasy that things could go back to how they were. Letting go of the hope that if you just explain it better, they'll finally understand. That hope is human, but in toxic financial dynamics, it keeps you stuck in cycles of self-doubt. And here's something important. Reclaiming clarity doesn't mean you become suspicious of everyone. It means you become respectful of your own perception. You learn to trust what your body, your intuition, and the evidence are telling you. You stop asking for permission to believe your own experience. This is where empowerment quietly begins, not with confrontation, not with revenge, but with the internal shift from "am I crazy?" to "I see it clearly now." That shift changes everything, because when clarity replaces confusion, manipulation loses its power. When clarity starts to settle in, something important shifts. the chaos quiets just enough for you to hear your own voice again. And that's where real healing begins, not in dramatic gestures, but in steady, grounded reclamation of your power. Financial autonomy isn't about becoming wealthy overnight or proving anything to anyone. It's about safety. It's about choice. It's about no longer living at the mercy of someone else's decisions. Reclaiming that power often starts small, learning what you didn't know before, asking questions without apologizing, opening accounts in your own name, understanding your numbers, even if they scare you at first. There may be a learning curve, and that's okay. Being unfamiliar with something doesn't mean you're incapable. It means you weren't given access, and access can be rebuilt. Support matters here more than people realize. Shame tells you to do this alone. Healing tells you to reach out. Whether it's a financial advisor, a therapist, a trusted friend, or a support group, safe witnesses help restore perspective. They remind you that what you experienced was real, and that recovery doesn't require perfection. It requires consistency. There's also a deeper layer of healing that happens internally. You begin to rebuild trust with yourself. You notice that you're making thoughtful decisions, that you're capable of planning, that you can tolerate discomfort without collapsing. Each small win repairs a piece of the identity that betrayal tried to erase. Independence isn't just external, it's psychological. It's common to feel AR during this stage, fear of making mistakes, fear of being alone, fear of repeating patterns. But fear doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're doing something new. Growth often feels like instability before it feels like freedom. And here's something essential to remember. You don't need to villainize the other person to move forward. You don't need revenge. You don't even need them to admit what they did. Your healing is not dependent on their awareness. It's dependent on your boundaries, your education, and your self-respect. Over time, money stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a tool again. A way to support your life, not control it. You begin to experience calm where there used to be dread, confidence where there used to be self-doubt. And that's when you realize something powerful. The betrayal didn't define you. The recovery did. You are not bad with money. You are not weak. You were betrayed, and you are capable of building a life that no longer requires permission. And that is what real freedom feels like.